Alright, hello and welcome. This is episode number 3. But before I begin, back in episode number 2, I know that's so long ago, there was a plant that I said made really good tea, and the little berries on it were delicious, and I was talking of the sumac tree. I'm sorry that escaped me, but it's the sumac tree, not to be confused with poison sumac. But sumac tree, have at it. The little berries are delicious. Now, that said, once you lean your seat back and buckle up, you are now on the road with Derek Outdoors. In the episode this week, as I said, episode number 3 is all about fishing. Now, I've been fishing pretty much my entire life. I started fishing, I think, when I was like 3. I've done conventional angling, which is spinner rod, cast rod, or bait cast rod, fly fishing, bow fishing, spear fishing, deep sea, charter fishing. Haven't tried noodling yet. I really want to do that. And I have not gone harpoon fishing yet, where you dive in with a big spear gun. When I say spear fishing, I mean actually throwing a spear. And bow fishing was a lot of fun. Really tricky, though, with light refraction on the water. But fishing is probably one of man's oldest sports, if not one of man's oldest professions. Which is funny because the word angle means to hook, but I really don't think that we'd all want to say that, oh, we're going out to be hookers, or we're professional hookers. I think that title's already been taken, and I just don't see that one going over. But anyway, angle means to hook. And they found evidence of fishing that dates back over 40,000 years. And I guarantee you that we were catching fish and eating fish way before that. I mean, anybody that's been around water has probably had to make a living off of fishing, especially coastal, river, lake communities. Our earliest fishing lures were made of stone and bone and wood. Lines would have been braided or would have been pieces of hide that they could have used to make line. I've also done hand line fishing. Hand lining for trout and bass is a lot of fun. Just on a side note, if you want to give yourself a challenge, go hand line. But back to ancient methods of fishing would have been hand lining, or net casting, or the simple use of a stick with the line, however you made your line, and whatever hook you created. And there are over 20,000 species of fish. I don't know how many of them are edible, but it would be really fun to try and catch all of them, and I doubt that I ever will. And I'm not gonna go into deep sea. I'm gonna focus more on angling here in the Northeast, especially southern Pennsylvania region. That's where I have most of my experience. And I have to tell you, I don't remember the first fish that I caught, though I also don't remember my first beer. So I do remember the first time, though. My first memory of fishing, I was a little guy, and it was like a magical place. It's middle of summertime. It was hotter than ever. My mom and dad were there. Somehow there was a boat. I don't know who owned it. One of my uncles, I think. And my pap was there. And it was hotter than anything that could have ever happened. And all I wanted to do was be in the water And we were on some like dirt boat ramp. I don't ever remember being on the boat. I just remember being on that ramp and being excited. And we were getting the boat either in the water or out of the water. But everybody was ready to be out on the water, or we were coming back from it. But that wasn't the exciting thing. For me, what I remember is being on that really hot boat ramp, watching people dock boats and back them down the ramp to get into the water. And then from there, I was literally angled. Because whenever we moved to Crescent Lakes in Loretto, that really began my journey as a fisherman. Now, my mom's actually the one that taught me how to fish, and I'm so glad that she took the time to do it, because I can't think growing up a day that I didn't devote at least an hour to fishing. And I mean, it really helped. I mean, obviously it helped having the lake right there, literally across the street, where I could just go and fish. And we had bass, perch, bluegill, a lot of catfish, carp. Carp fishing is one of the most fun types of fish that you can fish for. I mean, you cast out, let it sit, and then catch sunnies and bluegill or bass while you wait for a nice big carp to boom, pull that bobber down, and then you are in a fight. And let me tell you, they are some of the hardest fighting fish out there. Just excellent. If you have the patience for it, I don't recommend eating them. But if you have the patience and you live for that fight of the moment, go carp fishing. Absolutely wonderful. But going back to memories of fishing, my most memorable fish, one that I caught and one that I didn't. Whenever I started to get my wife into fishing, I took her to the body of water that I knew best. I took her to Crescent Lake. We spent the night camping down on the creek that I had so much time growing up on, and we used to be able to bass fish that creek, but my buddy Nate and I kind of fished it out one summer, and we put all the bass into this holding fishery, and we would use that as a way to stock the fish, and we ended up pulling all the fish out, putting them back in the lake, and we pretty much fished that whole creek out. We couldn't fish it for like 3 years. But the bass fishing in the lake improved because of our methods. And so camping out on this creek in the tent, got up the next morning, got the inflatable, went out, and I'm showing her everywhere that I know there will be big bass. And she's catching little bass. And I'm kind of hooking them left and right in the beginning, and then all of a sudden I got her tuned in and she started out fishing me, which was awesome. And she started pulling in, she pulled in a 2-pound bass, and then she had one little bigger, almost a 3-pounder, and then all of a sudden she's freaking out, and her rod is completely bent. I'm maneuvering the boat because we're in this stump field, because Crescent Lake's artificial, and the bass hung out in the stump fields. And I'm maneuvering the boat in and around the stump fields, and she pulls in one of the biggest largemouth that I had ever seen. It was over 2 feet long and weighed almost 4 pounds. This beautiful, big, fat, and healthy hunker of a largemouth. And the look on her face when she reeled that fish in, and she's holding it in 2 hands, and I'm taking pictures of her, and she is just ecstatic. Kid in a candy store, alive with energy for having caught this fish. And I will never, ever forget that. One of the one of the second most memorable fish, again, we were out on the inflatable, but we were on a lake called the Goin Reservoir. And we went back to where Goin Creek feeds into the reservoir, and we had to go under this little bridge, and we're in this back corner, and again, we're fishing for bass, and we had caught a few, but we went back there, and I had no idea. I had on, at the time, I was using one of those swim baits, the power bait swim baits, mimicking a swim shad, and I'm reeling in, and I'm watching these pike, and it's so, they were quizzical to me. I'd never caught a pike before, and I'm watching them swims like right up to the boat, following the lure, and I pulled it in, and I cast out again, and another one followed it. So I started keeping the lure right at the boat, and I made figure eights, and then bam! This massive pike just slams the lure and takes off, and now I'm ecstatic because I had never caught a pike before. And my wife's going, what are you gonna do with that? I said, I'm gonna catch it. She's like, well, how are you? Does it have teeth? I'm like, oh my gosh, it has tons of teeth. I said, wait. So we get it into the boat, and now it's my turn to be alive with energy for having caught this fish. And she's taking my picture, and I get my hooking tool, and I get the lure out, and I release him back into the water. I'm a catch and release guy. I don't care for trout too much. The only fish that I will really keep are trout every now and again, catfish if I'm going to fry them, or perch, sunfish if I'm going to fry them up. And I'm not a big keeper of my fish. I catch and release. And so those were probably my two most memorable fish. And I think those two will stick with me forever. Another one that'll stick with me forever, but not in a positive way, was the second stingray that I caught down in Florida. And it stung me right in the hand. I thought I was holding it where I'd be safe, and I wasn't. And that was some of the most excruciating pain that I had ever felt. My hand got all swollen, screwed my knuckle up, still screwed up. And I gotta tell you, don't fish for stingray or try and catch them in any way, shape, or form. And if you do, be really careful, because that's something that I never want to experience again. Absolutely beautiful fish to look at and really cool to see, and they feel kind of leathery. And again, I thought I was holding it where I was safe to hold it, and I was not. That sucker whipped itself around, and it pierced me right in the middle finger knuckle. And I mean hours upon hours of throbbing, blistering pain. And the only thing that worked was hot water, keeping my hand under scalding water. And eventually, after I had emptied the hot water heater, I just had to walk around, and I had to go for a walk and just swing my arm, try and get the swelling to go down. Oh my gosh, it was miserable. And that fish was memorable, but not for any good reason. Now, some of my techniques whenever I fish, if I'm fishing for carp, I want to fish with a bobber. I want to put the bait, depending on the water depth, I want to put that bait usually about 2 or 3 feet below my bobber, and I fish bread balls. Now I'll jump first. I'll throw dog food out into the water to bring the carp in. They'll smell that, and then I'll use a big bread ball to engulf my entire hook. And sometimes I'll use corn. Sometimes I'll mash the corn into the dough, and that's what I use to catch carp. On pretty heavy rod, 7-foot rod, and I don't go, if I'm fishing for carp, I'm putting spider wire on there because I know I'll straighten the hook out before I break it. And I use spider wire for bass too, just because usually where I fish for bass, there's a lot of underwater structure, a lot of down trees and stumps where I hang up a lot, and I absolutely hate retying lures. I hate it. That's why I'll tie a really good swivel. And I'll use a gold silver swivel. Again, a lot of guys will not, and they'll put a leader on the end. I put my lure right on the swivel, and again, that gives it more flash. I've never had, I can't say that I've never not caught fish because I had a swivel on. And one thing I try to do, I like to use a lot of artificial lures. To me, that's the challenge. That's the fun of it, is to catch them on artificial, because that has to deal with a lot of your technique, how you present the bait by letting it sink, giving it quick jerks, and letting the artificial lure do what the creators of that lure intended it to do. For bass and predatory fish, those the Berkeley and Power Bait swim shads, those were revolutionary when they came out. I had never seen anything like them. I have them in multiple sizes and colors and fish mimicry styles. Small swim shads, bluegills work really, really well, and your traditional minnows. And I like to present those like they are a dead fish. And what I have found, sometimes fishing them with a bobber and then getting it to look like, to getting the lure to lay on its side in the water column. Predatory fish, man, to them that's an easy meal and they will smack it. Now color, I try and match my color of the lure, whether it be worm, grub, frog, swim shad, what have you, and even the hard lures. If I'm fishing darker water, I want a darker lure. If the water's murky, I'm going with a green or a brown. I try and match my lure to the watercolor. I know a lot of guys will say you want something that stands out, but you have to remember that these fish, what they're feeding on, is going to try and be as best camouflaged as it can be. So you want to try and mimic that as best you can. And when you're fishing for trout and I don't know how to say this, I guess trout-like feeding fish, like your perch, and you're not quite sure what to use, take 10-15 minutes before you get there and go to the lakeshore or riverbank and overturn some rocks and look and see what natural bugs are there, if there's salamanders, and look for those natural aquatic critters that the fish are going to eat, and then try and find a lure or something or a fly in your arsenal that best mimics what's already in the water. Because again, those fish are going to want to eat what they're used to, but you want to present it like an easy meal to them. Or sometimes in the case of bass, one of my favorite techniques for bass, and one lure that I will always have, and I absolutely love it, and I stand by it, are the Rebel crayfish lures, hard lures. And I will cast those out, and I will rip those through the water as fast as I absolutely can. And then I'll let it sit for a second, and then I'll rip it as fast as I can, and I'll do that in spurts. And it is one of the best and one of my most favorite techniques for bass. Now for trout and perch, you really have to pay attention to how the trout are feeding. You can learn a lot, again, by, before you even cast anything, sit there, back up the bank, and study what's going on. If you can time it so that you are fishing during a hatch, like a mayfly hatch or caddisfly hatch, or even the dragonfly nymph hatch, those are your most optimal times. And again, have lures or flies that mimic that. But again, do your research and watch. Do the trout look lethargic? Are they feeding, or are they just schooled up? Because if they're just sitting there and they're not moving, or if you don't see the trout, that means that they're probably in an ambush position and they're feeding. If they're sitting open in the water column, as they will in the middle of the day, it's a crapshoot. You can rip 400 presentations of different lures and baits in front of those trout, and they're probably not going to take. I also like Berkeley Power Bait. Is really good for trout. And always present to trout upstream and work your bait downstream to the trout, or through your riffles and ripples into the deeper pools where the trout are going to set. And don't be alarmed if you don't catch them right away. After 2 or 3 casts, if you're not seeing any action, try a spoon. Trout will go for spoon. That boom, that big flash of color. And again, just be ready to change your lures and your flies often when fishing for any fish, really, because you want to find what they're feeding. And again, it might be that grub is the perfect answer. One of my favorites, again, for bass and trout are the yellows, the meaty, fat yellow grubs with the big curly tails. And then you present those right. But again, sometimes those don't work, and a lot of the time, it's going to come down to your color. Getting that color right, or even a change in your presentation to get your presentation proper, to get the fish to strike. Now, maybe you say, well, I'm going on an adventure, and I don't necessarily know what I'm gonna be fishing for when I get there. And so what I have, I carry in my truck, I carry a 6.5 foot light to medium duty reel with I think 20-pound spider wire on it, because it might be a creek, it might be a lake. And again, I'll carry for I guess your kit. I always have different weighted sinkers, leaders, if I get the chance to get into some steelhead, which I absolutely love, and I recommend you going somewhere in the middle of winter and go steelhead fishing. Just do it. I don't care if you don't catch anything. Bring some MREs, grab some buddies, get there early, fish all day, and just have at it. It's a wonderful experience. But again, back to your all-purpose kit. Always have a rattle trap. Carry 2 of them, different color, different sizes. Rattle trap, universal lure across the board. That's one of my go-to starter lures. Then have a few spoons of different size and color. Carry some rooster tails of different size and color, and different rooster spinners and rooster spoons of different size and color. Have a mix of your grubs and your artificial worms, a small mix. I mean, keep it light, keep it simple, something that can fit in into a fanny pack or a small tackle box. You don't need to bring everything. Carry a couple bobbers. can of power bait, a few different size hooks. I recommend 8s for trout. And go out and see and test. Carry a couple like shad lures. Fire Tiger is an excellent one that can be a universal lure. And again, throw that Rebel crayfish in there. And a few creature swim baits. And obviously, you're going to want Texas and Carolina rig hooks. And if you don't know a Carolina or a Texas rig, I would suggest looking it up. It is one of the best ways to run snagless. And I'll carry 1 or 2 artificial lizards. And again, with my various sinkers, few leaders, and always have a water bottle with you too. And a multi-tool is essential. Other than that, I would say and again, you don't need all of that. And maybe you have things that you like to use, but what you're going for are different sizes, different colors, and anything that can be universal across the board. So maybe I can fish with it for bass, I can fish with it for crappie, I can fish with it for trout or perch, walleye, pike, what have you. Also, not a bad thing to have, but a good topwater lure, a good hula popper. Medium size, fantastic lure. And I'll leave you with this. Like I said, one of my most memorable fish is one I didn't catch. So, find yourself some good fishing partners. My best friend, Nate Link, when we were growing up, that's all we did. He pretty much lived at my house and we lived on the lake. And boy, ever did we nail some bass, man. And catfish, carp. We fished it all and we fished it hard. I got my wife really into fishing. Daughter really into fishing. And definitely the grandkids. And there are also a lot of programs where you can mentor someone fishing too, and where you can take somebody fishing. There are also different veterans programs that I firmly believe in, where you find a veteran who may have a hard time getting out to go fishing. Shout out to all our vets. Thank you all for your service. Thank you to the service for our police and all our first responders and the guys overseas and on bases training right now. So thanks to all those guys. There are a lot of programs where you can mentor someone fishing, but get somebody to go fishing too. Somebody in your family, a loved one, a good friend. I'm a huge advocate for that. Getting kids involved in the outdoors, and they'll love it and they'll thank you for it. And you'll love it too, and who knows? Maybe you'll find that person out fishing you, and you'll find it more rewarding than any fish or fishing that you've done. And I gotta tell you, just get out there, enjoy that sun. A bad day of fishing is still pretty much better than a good day doing just about anything else. So, I hope you enjoyed the ride. You're free to exit the cab. And I hope you enjoyed being on the road with Derek Outdoors.